We'd like to welcome everyone to our 2023 Veterans Day program, which obviously we're having on November 10th instead of the 11th. With so many activities going on in Yorktown on Saturday, on the 11th, we didn't think we would have a parking availability to do our program. So anyway, so we're here doing this. I'd like to thank the Yorktown Fife and Drums for their music downstairs. They're always a tremendous asset to our community. At this point, I'd like to have the tolling of the bell.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the York County Historical Committee, I welcome all of you, especially our honored guests, our veterans. It was here in Yorktown our military secured the birth of our country when Cornwallis surrendered to our Allied forces in the last major battle of the American Revolution. And our military has continued to defend our country and freedom ever since. After our program, you are invited to go downstairs to the museum where the Yorktown Preservation Society will share refreshments while we have our first Cards for Heroes event. Please join us and sign a card to send to our military. Everything is provided with no cost to you, thanks to generous donations of blank cards to the committee. If you find you have extra blank cards at home, please consider donating them to us to use for future signings. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. Would you all stand for the invocation? This is called the Veterans Day Prayer by Karen Barber. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you today for all of the men and women who have served in our armed forces. We are grateful for their dedication, their discipline, faithfulness, and courage. From them, we may learn the virtues of selfless service, unswerving loyalty to country, the discipline of teamwork for the good of all, obedience to authority, and perseverance in difficult and challenging situations. Bless the families of our veterans for the sacrifices made on the home front when duty called their loved ones away to serve. Amen. We want to recognize some of the Virginians that won the Medal of Honor throughout the history of our country. There's 62 Virginians that were Medal of Honor winners up through the Vietnam War, and we're going to highlight 11 of them, some with ties to York County. And the first one we're going to highlight is Private James Gardner, won his Medal of Honor at the Battle of Chapin's Farm, also called Newmarket Heights in Henrico County, in 1864. What he did was he led troops up through a gap, assaulted and overtook the enemy lines. He was awarded the Medal of Honor. He's from Yorktown, Virginia. He also has ties to Gloucester, Virginia. I think he passes away in Gloucester, but he grew up in Yorktown. But he served with the 38th USCTs in the American Civil War. At this time, I'd like to have our national anthem now. And thanks to Terry Taylor for doing it for us.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated. Our second portrait, Medal of Honor winner, a cocky-looking young man, Sergeant Benjamin Brown, United States Army. And as I said, the Medal of Honor started during the American Civil War, and the Virginians that have won it span our history. He's an interesting winner of the medal because he was out in the Indian Territories in Arizona, and he was in charge of a group that were guarding the U.S. payroll for the troops. And the payroll was assaulted by a group of robbers that tried to take the payroll. They weren't successful. He gets shot in the abdomen and in both arms, and he still pushes the robbers away. They keep the payroll, the troops get paid, and everything's good. He was from Spotsylvania County, Virginia, and I think he is buried out in the Indian Territories, but he survives his wounds. So, but Sergeant Benjamin Brown, how many of you would like to have that hat? And the mustache. Our next portrait, Portrait 3, is another interesting one, Fireman First Class Robert Penn. Robert Penn is serving on the USS Iowa, and this is the first USS Iowa. And they're out in being assaulted in Cuba, and their boilers hit. And he's a fireman first class, and he's one of the guys that tends the boilers, loads the coal in to keep the boilers running. So when the boilers hit, the gasket blows, and they're losing power. And he stands there with boiling water like a foot from him, continuing to feed coal in while they're trying to repair the boilers so they can get back underway. And as a result of that, he won the Medal of Honor with the United States Navy. Now, he's from City Point, Virginia, which we now know as Hopewell. So if you find it, but another interesting time. You find out how many conflicts we've been in because we're all over the place. We're in Cuba in 1898 and then part of the Spanish-American War. Our next portrait, Lieutenant Colonel Wyndon Neville, United States Marine Corps. He wins his Medal of Honor in Veracruz, Mexico. We send a contingent down there with Marines. He's serving with the 15th Marine Company, and they're a mounted company. And so what happens is they're overrun by, surrounded and overrun by 400 of the enemy, and they've got 3 troops of cavalry at that time. There's probably about 45 to 50 of them. So they hold up in a ravine for an entire night, and overnight he organizes the 3 squadrons, 3 troops of cavalry to assault in 3 directions, and they override the 400 and break them up, and he wins the Medal of Honor leading his troops. I also think he's a VPI guy. He was in the Corps of Cadets at VPI. And I think his Medal of Honor is at VPI. Our next portrait is Captain William Upshur, also United States Marine. So in 1915, a year later, we're in Haiti. And he's leading an assault as part of the invasion of Haiti, or where we're going down to put down an insurrection and assist the Haitians. We've been down there a few times over the years, I think. And he leads his troops from the front, and a lot of times the captains do that, the lieutenant colonels don't do that, which makes it interesting for the other fellow that won the Medal of Honor. But he leads the troops from the front, he survives, he's slightly wounded, and survives the encounter. Our next portrait, Sergeant Earl Gregory, United States Army. He wins his Medal of Honor during the Meuse-Argonne offensive in Casanova, France, on October 8th, 1918. If you're familiar with the Meuse-Argonne offensive, it lasted about 6 weeks. And it was the last major offensive of the war. He's from Mecklenburg County, Virginia. He's in a mortar unit, so really it's a trench unit. They're not supposed to advance out in front. But because they're being fired at so often, he gets tired of it, and he said, I'm going to go get them. So he advances out of the mortar position by himself and assaults 2 German machine gun nests and captures 19 of the enemy, and survives the incident. Our next portrait is Lieutenant Richard Newman, United States Army. Richard Newman is actually born in Wisconsin, spends his entire life in Virginia. He's from a little place called Remlick, Virginia, which is near Urbana. And a friend of mine was telling me about him. He said, you know, my dad told me he was a Medal of Honor winner, and you would just not know it because he ran a hardware store. He was just a simple guy, you know, didn't tell anybody about it if he didn't know he'd done all this. So he's in the Anzio operation with the 34th Infantry Division. And he goes out in front of his troops. He's a lieutenant at the time, and assaults 3 German machine gun positions. So he overruns the first one, wounds 2 and kills 2, overruns the second one. They pull back, overruns a 3rd machine gun position, and the German troops pull back to this farmhouse. So he enters the farmhouse. There's, I think, 11 of them in the farmhouse under arms, and he tells them, you need to, and they're, of course, they're all pointing their weapons at him. He tells them, basically, you guys need to surrender because I've got another 100 Americans right behind me, which he didn't have, but they all surrendered. So he wins the Medal of Honor for that particular action, comes back home after the war and runs a hardware store. At this time, we'd like to have our wreath laying. We've got 3 groups that will be laying wreaths for us. The first one is Comte de Grasse chapter, National Society of Daughters of the American Revolution. Our second wreath is Disabled American Veterans chapter 13. These groups support us every year for this event. Our third wreath is the Morehouse Society, Children of the American Revolution, another group that supports us every year for these events. At this time, we'd like everyone to stand for taps. Thank you. Thank you, Jerry. Our buglist, everyone can sit down. Our buglist today is Jerry Carwack, remotely related to Bonnie Carwack, our chairman. I appreciate him coming out and doing that for me. It's always a plus the more people can be involved in the ceremonies. Our next portrait, you may have heard of this guy, Desmond Doss. Desmond Doss was so renowned as a Medal of Honor winner, they made a movie about him called Hacksaw Ridge. So and he was from Lynchburg, Virginia. And my father-in-law was from Lynchburg, and they grew up together, and he used to talk about him, and I really didn't pay attention until the movie came out, and I go, all right, now I know what he did. But he was his religion didn't permit him to carry weapons, but he still wanted to serve, and if you've seen the movie, it gives the explanation. So he becomes a medic. So he can still serve with combat troops. And during the Battle of Okinawa for over a 5-week period, he rescues troops. If you've seen it, he goes on the ridge, and he starts dragging casualties back. The first United States Army troops that go up there are shot all to pieces, and he drags 75 casualties back and lowers them down the ridge with a rope and saves them. And eventually he gets wounded several times. The last wound broke his arm, and he took a rifle stock and splinted his arm and kept on saving troops. So after the war, he was disabled from his wounds. But just it's an excellent movie and a good way to tell his particular story. If you ever go online, and I'm sure many of you do, Medal of Honor Society has a really nice website with everybody and everything. You can pull it up by states, you can pull it up by conflict, and look at what the individuals have sacrificed over the years for our country. So far, all the Medal of Honor winners we've highlighted survived the wars that they were in. Hospital Corpsman Francis Hammond, he doesn't survive. He dies of his wounds during the conflict. Hospital Corpsman Hammond wins the Medal of Honor. He's assigned to a platoon of Marines. Marines don't have their own medics or corpsmen. The Navy provides them. And he goes in the assault with them, and he drags casualties over and saves casualties, protects them with his body, and he gets wounded several times, and the second wound is mortal. So he just doesn't survive the wounds. And he's buried at Arlington Cemetery. At this point now, we would like to recognize our veterans, and we'd like to have our veterans stand and come forward.
Face backwards.
At this time, we would normally be retiring our colors, so we're going to move on to Portrait 10. And Portrait 10 is PFC Garfield Langhorne, United States Army. He won his Medal of Honor at Pleiku, Vietnam. He does not survive his wounds, January 15th of 1969. If you followed that, it was a terrible, most of Vietnam was a terrible part of the conflict, the Battle of Pleiku. He was from Cumberland County, Virginia. And what Private Langhorne did was they were sent in to rescue two pilots on a Cobra that had gone down. And the pilots were deceased, so they're recovering the remains and trying to get them back to the Hueys that they were landed with when they were surrounding an attack by North Vietnamese troops. So they start taking casualties, so Langhorne starts pulling the casualties and getting them into one area so they can evacuate those casualties. When a North Vietnamese threw a grenade in at the casualties, he threw himself on the grenade, saved all of the wounded, but sacrificed himself to do that. I'd like to do our closing prayer now. That's one. I try to find something that says this in a different way, and I haven't been able to find anything better than this. But it's Charles Provence's poem, It is a Soldier. So if everyone would stand for this. It is the soldier, not the minister, who has given us the freedom of religion. It is the soldier, not the reporter, who has given us freedom of the press. It is the soldier, not the poet, who has given us the freedom of speech. It is the soldier, not the campus organizer, who has given us freedom to protest. It is the soldier, not the lawyer, who has given us the right to a fair trial. It is the soldier, not the politician, who has given us the right to vote. It is the soldier who salutes the flag, who serves beneath the flag, and whose coffin is draped by the flag, and who allows the protester to burn the flag. Charles M. Provence. Our last Medal of Honor winner I'd like to highlight is Sergeant Major Edward Ratcliffe, United States Army, and he won his Medal of Honor at Chapin's Bluff or Newmarket Heights, the same place our first Medal of Honor winner was, James Gardner. Edward Ratcliffe, Sergeant Major, when his particular company assaulted the works at Chapin's Farm, all of his officers were killed, and being the sergeant major, he took over the company. He was the first one in the works. And because of the bravery he showed, he won the Medal of Honor. Now, he's from James City County, Virginia. He's buried at the Naval Weapons Station in what we call the Cheesecake Cemetery. And about 12 years ago, we did dedication of the stone. So this particular stone, there's no photograph of him, unfortunately. This particular stone is at Cheesecake Cemetery on Naval Weapons Station. When we did the dedication, we had a full color guard, a lot of contingent of troops and representatives from the weapons station there. And his great-great-grandson was a United States Marine, and he presented the flower and the flag for the thing to the family. He still has family in the area, and it was a great thing. And if you notice, military stones or Medal of Honor winners are encased in gold, so you'll see the gold lettering on there. And that sets him apart from any of the others. And it's an aside, he wasn't a Virginian. A few weeks ago, around October 19th, when we were doing the Yorktown Day stuff, we were doing activities on the 18th with the British and Canadian contingents that had troops here. So there's a plaque at Nelson House for the British troops, Cornwallis troops, and we did a ceremony there, and we did one down on the waterfront at the Queens Rangers with the Canadian contingent, did another reception ceremony at the Waterman's Museum. So the British sent 3 naval officers to participate in the ceremony. The Canadians sent an Air Force and Army officer. And when we were over at the reception, the Army officer had been stationed at the Pentagon at some point, and he told me the story of the cemetery in D.C., and he said it's an old asylum cemetery. So you got a joke coming. He said, so do you know of the asylum in D.C.? I said, well, we call it the Capitol. So, and he just looked at me a minute. He said, okay. But anyway, he found out on the grounds there was a Canadian from Halifax that had joined the American Navy in the late 1800s, and he wins the Medal of Honor. And all he had, and he ends his life, his last years at this asylum, probably from PTSD, but they didn't know what it was then. And so he's buried in the asylum cemetery with just this little headstone with his name spelled wrong. So this Canadian officer took it upon himself to get a military stone placed, and it would be this type of stone with the gold lettering. So I looked it up when he told me his name was Noel, and it's spelled N-O-I-L, and the old stone had N-O-E-L, I think. And you can pull it up on the Find a Grave site and see the old stone and the new stone that they had placed there for him. So it's another Medal of Honor story, not a Virginian, but still an interesting story. And it also gives you an idea of what happened to some veterans after their service. So thank you all for being here. Thank you, veterans, for everything you've done for us.